few stories below that place, and there was a small chapel. Most people don't know this. There's a small chapel there in Westminster, and it's where Cardinal Fisher actually was able to celebrate Mass and receive the one, Christ, who had given himself to Cardinal Fisher just hours before he stood directly above that altar and was condemned to death. And within the last year or so, the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth, has granted permission for Masses to once again be celebrated by Roman Catholic priests in that chapel. And so every Wednesday, as the Parliament meets upstairs, there's Mass being celebrated for them. Our readings talk about marriage. Today, what do we know about marriage? Jesus is presented with this question about who will this woman be married to in heaven? And there's 7 brothers. Who will she be married to? And Jesus points out that marriage is for us here on earth. Marriage is meant to lead us towards that mystery of 3 that leads us into the eternal mystery of 3 persons, union with God. And so marriage is only for earth. People say, well, I feel like we're going to be married for forever and for eternity. It's like, no, I'm glad there's a permanent commitment there. But in heaven, we stand as individuals before God because we don't need the foreshadowing of the union because we have the union with God. So in heaven, it will be 1 plus infinity, God, equals infinity plus 1. That in heaven we are not assumed and dissolved into God, but we stand as individuals having union with the eternal Trinity. But why that's important now for us is because while we are still here on earth, we get to actually still experience that eternal union with God. I can't tell you how many students I've talked to in the last week who are just feeling overwhelmed, who are feeling depressed, who feel alone. And I'm so glad that we're talking about it. But that's why this is so important, is to recognize that with the eye of eternity, with God forever with me, that God is also forever with me now, that God is with me, that I am not alone. And that whether I'm just at home in my room or whether I'm actually in a situation where I'm being tested in my faith and what I believe, that I am not alone. And that's what allows people like Cardinal Fisher, St. Thomas More, the people in our first reading, what allows them to stand up for what they believe is because they know they're not alone. And on a college campus, we can feel pretty alone being a person of faith. So what do we know? This Tuesday, we know that the majority of our country, usually the majority of our country can help us find a path through the muck and find some clarity through the fog. But what we know is that the majority of our country is going to be unhappy on Tuesday. That's what we know. It's like a guarantee, right? That nobody's happy with our politics. Nobody's happy with this election, with our candidates. But what it reminds us, and what it has to do with these readings and everything, is that no candidate can save us. No political party can save us. No state can save us. The states are not always right. That there's only one who saves us, and that's Jesus Christ. And even if our whole country goes to hell in a handbasket, even if World War III is going to start 2 years from now, it doesn't change the fact that we have a Savior and that He's the answer we're looking for. And our invitation is to turn and to cling to Him. I was thinking about this. So this week for Halloween, I was a character from The Princess Bride. Have you seen The Princess Bride? There's an old guy that's bald. That was me, right? So, But there's a scene in the movie where he's got 2 cups. And he's sitting there, and they're trying to decide, battle of wits, which cup do I choose? And our entire country is all saying, which candidate do we choose? Good Catholics are like, Father, give me some direction here. I'm so stinking confused. What do I do? And it's kind of, we look at this and we say, well, clearly I can't choose the candidate in front of you because they're advocating for things that are intrinsically evil. And I'm not even sure about the character of this person, so clearly I can't choose that candidate. But then I also can't choose the candidate in front of me because this person is clearly lacking charity and integrity and a bigot and blames every single person who turns against them, like half the people on the internet blogosphere, right? They turn against everybody who doesn't support them, so clearly I can't choose that candidate in front of me. And so what do? We're all 18 here, right? What do? Only you can decide that. That in our conscience, we kind of have to choose which cup of poison am I going to drink. Some people are saying, well, what if I choose a 3rd cup? And they say, but people are saying I'm throwing it away. But they're saying that maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'd rather choose the 3rd cup than to eat any pork. But I'd love to apply that scene one more step. The hero, so to speak, is able to get through that scene because he has joined himself to that poison, to that evil over many years. We have one who has joined himself to our sin and our evil and shows us the pathway through, and that's Christ. That the only way for us to survive drinking any cup of poison, any evil that the world throws at us, is by clinging to Christ and letting Him bring us through. That's the invitation here. Last little story. Yesterday I was in Phoenix. There were one of our old staff members and 4 other guys were ordained deacons. And at one of the parties, the wife of one of the gentlemen stood up and she said, I just want to tell a little story. She said, several years ago, my husband proposed to me at San Javier del Bac mission outside of Tucson. And she said, we went for a little hike outside the mission, and he pointed out to me, he said, there's some little rocks here, there's some big rocks, but do you see that big white cross on that hill? She said, yeah. He said, I don't know what the future holds for us. I don't know if we're going to face small obstacles or really big obstacles. But I know that my focus is Christ, and I would like to spend the rest of my life walking with you through any obstacles that come our way to help together to get to heaven. And so the reality is there's a big probability that you and I are going to face a lot of difficulties in our future, especially if we cling to Christ, whom the world does not understand, who speaks a truth that seems confusing in the muck. But if we can cling to Him, and if we can keep our eyes focused on heaven, on the resurrection, then we can be able to walk through any difficulties, any sufferings, any persecution, stand before any person or people, standing true to who we are, strong in conscience, because our God is with us. And even if there's a high probability that we're going to face that, what is guaranteed is that when we get to our eternal destination, with 100% probability that we will receive our eternal payout.